Hello, my name is Jorge Soto, and welcome to my presentation on improving grievance reporting. The project that we present here is aimed at telling the story of the quality improvement team in action through data. This project is aimed to cover and display leadership and practice, and it covers an array of topics. As we cover each slide, we'll see that one of the slides for each section will contain information on the progress made at that time for the project, and the second slide will cover how this section related to the different aspects of leadership. Starting out with the introduction to leadership, here we have the selection of project vision and rationale. In this case, we saw that the title selected was Enhancing the Member Grievance Report Template for a Health Plan. The background mentions that the grievances and quality aspects of the health plan are critical elements, thus the need for improved reporting. And the overall vision was to be able to harness the data and focus on actionable data, which can be used for the creation or follow through of new improvement projects. In this same section, we see that the first thing we had to enter for the project was the framework on how it's going to be done. This relates to leadership when it comes to leadership traits, and especially when it comes to leadership behavior types. For example, I have a more relationship style leadership, and one of my teammates is more task oriented. So we designated myself as a lead, and for him as a project coordinator to keep us on track. Now moving on to section 2 here. This covers competencies and team culture. At this point of the project, first we had to determine where our source data was going to be from. In the case of the grievances themselves, these are captured on Innover, which is a grievance platform. Innover itself generates reports or spreadsheets, and these were captured in Excel. And then these Excel spreadsheets were imported into a database management software, in this case Microsoft SQL, which will give us analysis and the ability to do queries to harness the data obtained from the grievance platform. Now, in this portion and section 2, we saw that selecting the culture and the role of the leader was important. In this sense, my style, coming from being more relationship oriented, relates to being more of a democratic way, because I sought input and consensus at every point with the team and getting all as much possible information as I could before making a decision on how to proceed. And the team culture here, in this case, a corporate culture, was determined to be data safety. As this relates because the insurance industry overall, including health insurance, is highly regulated, which aligns with the traits of this type of corporate culture that mentioned that it's realistic, careful, and prepared. Now move on to section 3. So in section 3, we have building a constructive team climate. At this point, the progress in the project, we had to determine which were going to be the new items, not just the core ones already presented, but new ones. In this case, for deliverables, we decided on, once again, creating our own grievance database so we can um, create our own queries, our own source of data analysis, and use this information to create new graphs. These usually have to be presented to higher ups, all this information. So having intuitive graphics and the short amount of time we got to present it was key to success of our improved report. Now, here within the section, we found that the organizational culture and diversity were key. In the case of organizational climate, we saw that, in essence, constructive feedback was key to be able to um, keep a positive attitude and good morale with all the team members. When it comes to diversity, we sought to add other people to our project, even if only as consultants, with different perspectives. For example, our team was mostly clinical, so getting people, in this case, from our grievance team, with mostly analysts and administrative people, give us some more information on how to decide, for example, new items like the grievance resolution types that we discussed before. So these were covered in free text, so there's no drop downs. So to determine the basic elements and most common ones, we had to consult with them. They give us their experience and expertise, and we decided on 7 categories for this type resolution in case of complaints. And that's how we resolved that, and how that added to our own team and our own progress. In the next section, section 4, we covered managing conflict. At this point of the project, the main issues that we covered were scheduling and IT challenges. When it comes to scheduling, we had a tough time um, either finding time to schedule the meetings or having all the people make it to the meetings. And the other challenge was the database, given that our source data had quote unquote dirty data that was not captured properly. We needed more time from the IT, so which created some tension, given that they a lot of time we originally requested had run out. Now, how does managing conflict relate to this part of the project? Well, first, when it comes to deadlines, the main thing that we found here was that people were getting inadequate information. So they didn't know exactly which meetings to show up to, that because they didn't think it was relevant to them. So once we resolved that, we managed people to be able to attend those meetings. When it comes to our IT team, to resolve the conflict with them, we focus on approach of getting a non-zero sum game, meaning a win-win. So we both benefit. We did this by getting approval from the IT manager to add this, be able to add this to their metrics, and be counted as part of their work, which allow us to request more time. And again, establishing a win-win. Now here in section 5, now we cover ethics and values. At this point in the project, we had to decide on the final database deliverables. In this case, this involved the store procedures. These are algorithms that basically clean any kind of data or remove any, maintain the integrity basically of the data obtained from, in this case, Excel and spreadsheets. We had to finalize the tables. We had import tables, which we can use, and we had to determine which one would be the final tables that actually we could have reliable data. Once we had the tables with reliable data, then we can do the final queries based on the information we needed. That way we can get reliable results. Now, when it comes to Section 5 and values-based leadership and the way it relates to our project, we had that my um, or one of my core personal values was transparency. Now, being transparent about everything in the project was not as easy, given that, for example, here in SQL, going too much into detail on this section with the nurses, the quality nurses, was not as effective because of the level of understanding. So I learned here that I had to, yes, exercise transparency, but only give the informations needed for their portion of the project, or in a way they could understand so they could follow along and not overwhelm them with technical issues. And we did this by having a person-centered approach and sitting down with everybody to determine the scope of what role they're going to have. Overall, our consensus with everybody was, when it comes to core team values, was that of integrity, attitude, and continuous improvement. Attitude was key, given that we all have different backgrounds. So being positive about the project, even when we missed deadlines, was key to keeping the team morale going. Now, in section six, our here, our last section, we have, then this part of the project, we had to finalize graphs and spreadsheets. So basically, we went over to the sponsors to see which ones were needed to here. These two, the top five by subcategory, for example, are regulatory, and the second one here, for example, by resolution category. It's a new one we're adding. So we can add new items but not take away any ones that are needed by regulations. They're compensatory, meaning that they aim to remedy the issue, and under form of potential quality issues, they're distributive, meaning that they aim to, by improving quality, maximizing the limited resources allotted to the safety net. Now in this section, we have a representation of how the new data is going to look for the following committee meetings. Here we do just a quick overview on the tables and the graphs needed. For example, this covers all the grievances by category, followed by amount of grievances per 1,000 members per each quarter of 2019. And this because we see them mostly, we stay stable at one grievance for every 1,000 members. Then we display here the top grievances by subcategory and by quarter of 2019. For example, in gray, for example, here we can see quality of service or quality of service against our staff. Same information but displayed with stacks. This is a new portion which covers how the grievances are resolved. For example, here we see that the most common way we resolve agreements is by changing to another provider, followed by care coordination, meaning that we were able to resolve the issue where they have the provider and they stayed with them. Then we have the same complaint resolutions, but now by quarter, so we can see any spikes. In this case, for example, we see that on the second quarter we had provider changes. This is the most common. Now we move on into of the grievances or medical grievances, which ones were referred to the PQI process or deemed potential quality issues. Medical grievances are managed by non-clinical staff, and these PQIs, which are essentially grievances, are also managed by nurses. One of the issues we had before is that too many were being sent over. So after developing a new triage process in the second quarter, you see how the amount of grievances referred to the nurses as PQIs dropped to now an average of 72, freeing up the quality nurses to do other improvement projects. And now we see here the PQIs by their source grievance, and as mentioned before, the most common grievances that turn into PQIs are the ones labeled quality care. And lastly, this is how the nurses resolve the PQIs, or quality care grievances. Basically, as they show here, they have follow-up actions by category. In this case here, the most common follow-up action is sending a letter of education to the provider, basically showing them a way to prevent the same issue in the future, followed by corrective action plans, which are common in nursing homes, and track and trends usually used more for other ancillary vendors like transportation. Now, moving on, we cover our last section on self reflection, team feedback, and lessons learned. This is here my small here home office where I do most of my learning and yes, also reflecting. My main takeaway here, I would say, was on building team culture, meaning that once you build the right culture into your team, the workflow will move along better without as much needed supervision. Another thing, of course, was leveraging traits, basically determining strengths and weaknesses and leveraging that, giving people certain sections of the project based on their strengths. And lastly, feedback that I got from my team mainly was organizational skills, have better communication with the team, especially when it comes to conflict resolution, and lastly, consistency in workflow. And in this one, especially, I have to agree because um, the project did have some too many starts and stops, and which makes sometimes for not necessarily the best morale. So I'm definitely gonna take away the consistency as a lesson learned. And lastly, we show here our references. Well, thank you so much. This is our project, and I welcome your feedback.